Jumpin' In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello,
Good evening.
and welcome. And here we are once again on a Friday night at Manx Radio as we head headlong, helter-skelter towards spring. Isn't that wonderful? Yes, the best in modern and contemporary jazz, of course. Jumping in with myself, H.
And me, Chris. It's spring already, I don't know what you're saying. Welcome to this week's show, and can you believe it, we're nearly quarter of a way through the year. As I just said, spring has been casually doing its thing for nearly a month now, but perhaps we're all too distracted by world events and the associated price hikes. So, well, for the next hour or so, forget that, and we'll bring you some of the best of modern and contemporary jazz around. So, H, what's been commanding your attention this week, other than your travels, and any gems you picked up along the way?
There's plenty of great stuff out there, and I'm still playing catch-up as I am all year round. Suffice to say, this week I've got a new oldie, or a new one for me, but oldie in any case, from about 20-30 years ago from Oregon, would you believe? Treffunk Jazz, Ludwigsburg, 1990. What's that, 36 years? Where's that time gone? Also thinking again about the great Richie Beirach with an album I'd never heard before, which is rather nice. And then right up to date with something coming out next month from Liberetto and Lars Danielson.
And from me, well, in a violent and turbulent sounding list of choices, we punch, we roar and whisper we're having nightmares. And to start with, we're considering much missed words of restraint from great leaders of the past with Oliver Nelson and his big band, and Let the Word Go Forth.
Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike, that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed.
Nelson and his big band, featuring many great names, including Phil Woods on alto and Hank Jones on piano, recorded in 1967 to honour the memory of JFK. The Kennedy Dream features extracts from speeches as a prelude to each movement. As one reviewer noted, the result is a heartfelt yet eerie combination, perhaps a bit off-putting, but absolutely relevant decades later. That was written some years ago, but it's still relevant today, I think, particularly when he states the torch has been passed to a new generation as committed to upholding human rights and maintaining peace as the country has always been committed. Not so sure about that. Oliver Nelson was always interested in time signatures, borne out by his fabulous scores for Ironside series. If you remember the show, he used to go regularly move through increasing meters in each piece of the soundtrack. In Let the World Go Forth, after Kennedy extract starts, the track starts with a tuba and woodwind prelude, and then a 7/8 ostinato with flutes and vibes, based on a theme from his Book of Patterns in descending whole tones, and then this dramatic 9/4 theme comes in. Terrific stuff. The Kennedy Dreams discontinued, and was also available as part of a 6-disc collection, Oliver Nelson, the Argo, Verve and Impulse Big Band Studio Sessions, which I picked up in Ray's some years ago. I had a look online if you fancy it. The box set's are available for around about £120 second hand, and around £40 for the Kennedy Dream.
Maybe I won't bother with that one just yet. One I did pick up actually quite recently. I think it might have been sent it ages ago, but it was following the recent sad death of guitarist Ralph Towner. We, of course, did a special here on Jumpin In a few weeks back now, and there are a couple of tracks played recently on a Jazz Record Requests, and I imagine there'll be more in the Jazzwise magazine. I was reading a piece in there, and it quoted a track from this album, Treffpunkt Jazz Oregon, Ludwigsburg 1990. I thought, well, I have a lot of Oregon, but I hadn't heard that one, and I always love hearing them live. And fortunately, it wasn't £100. I couldn't find the download, so CDs are good, and I always prefer in many ways something a bit more tangible. Less than £100, and a double CD to boot. Beautifully recorded. It's direct from the desk, I imagine, from 1990. So with Trilok Gertu on percussion, after the sad death, of course, in the mid-80s of Colin Walcott. But the rest, Glenn Moore, Paul McCandless and Ralph Towner, the original members of Oregon. And from the first CD, one of the later tracks, or I think the first album they did with Trilok Gertu doing percussion and such like, the track and the name, Ecotopia. live, as you can probably gather, 36 years ago. Oh my lordy, that makes you feel old, doesn't it? Treffpunkt Jazz Ludwigsburg 1990 in the Jazz Heroes series. And as I say, I believe we were actually sent to something like that some time back. It's bypassed me altogether, or I might have missed it in any case, but I do like to have a CD in my hand, being the old-fashioned fart that I am. And yeah, thoroughly enjoyable it is. Like I said, really good recording, double CD on that one, and really does capture the spirit of the later Oregon after. It did become, again, more sort of electronic, obviously, and that hitherto, I think, when Colin Walcott was still playing, it was much more sort of chamber jazz and more acoustic. And then later on, when Trillock came in, he sort of brought in more of a sort of drum kit sound along with his tabla. And Ralph started using more with his Prophet and his synth playing and such like. And I liked it, I must admit. It did give it a sort of a different edge, a sort of slightly harder edge, but none the worse for that in places. And I think Ecotopia was the name of the first album that Trillock, I think it was anyway, Trillock Gertu did with them. Sadly now, of course, Oregon definitely no more since, like I said, Ralph sadly died a few weeks back now. And before that, of course, Glenn Moore, after about 40 odd years, said, you know what, I've had enough now, and sort of decided to pursue his own career, as it were, at the age of whatever he is. I have to say, I don't think I've seen any albums from Glenn Moore since he left Oregon, but I could be making that up, I don't know.
There have been a couple, and funnily enough, you'd think we were psychic sometimes, because we don't talk about what we're bringing along to the shows each week. But following the recent death of Ralph Towner, I, too, like a lot of listeners who like him and knew him, would have revisited my Oregon albums.
Yeah.
And it may be serendipity that a former band member, Paul McCandless, has just released an archive recording of his quintet live at Kimball's East, which was a San Francisco Bay jazz club back in 1992. Sadly, I had a look. The club no longer exists, but many great recordings remain by various jazz artists. Taken from the Paul McCandless Quintet live at Kimball's East, here's Punch. Punch from the Paul McCandless Quintet's recent release live at Kimball's East. Did you ever manage to visit that one?
You know what? I know of Kimball's East, never been to it. And I think it's gone now, isn't it?
Any guesses about the lineup on that?
No, I don't off the top of my head. It does sound interesting, isn't it? Playing those two together, which actually I think go together very well, with Paul McCandless on both, of course. And there is a sort of, you could almost hear that and think, oh, is that a later Oregon album, maybe? I don't know, but no, go on. Who
well,
else
that
is
straight
on
ahead jazz piano playing was Lyle Mays, more or less.
Ah, nice.
Which, interestingly, again, the album coincides.
Not often you hear him on straight piano, actually.
No, coincides with the 6th anniversary of his death, just by coincidence. The group also features Steve Rodby on bass, of course, who was a former Pat Metheny group member along with Lyle, and Mark Turner on drums, who went on to join Oregon a bit later on,
yeah.
and Fred Simon, who I don't know, but he was playing the synth on it. The tour was to promote the release of McCandless's Premonition album, which is very good, actually. I've got that. And it sits between the Oregon albums Never and Forever and Troika, which I think was the first one. I think that was the first one with...
It might have been, yeah. I couldn't remember if it was Troika or Ecotopia, but anyway, around there. Great stuff.
Well worth a listen, either way.
It is indeed, as is all the music we feature here, of course, on Jumpin' In, the best in modern and contemporary jazz. And if anything you'd like to hear, or anyone you think we should hear or should play or feature on the show, drop us a line. Howard Kane with an E at manxradio.com, or indeed Chris Kane with an E as well at manxradio.com. Be delighted to hear from you. We should just set up a Jumpin' In account, actually. It'd be much easier, wouldn't it?
It would. And don't forget, of course, that you can listen again.
Of course, just go to either your favourite podcast provider, or if you've not done it before, the easy way, go to the Manx Radio website and just click onto Jumpin' In. You'll find all the podcasts from the last 1,000 years there. Wonderful stuff. It is Jumpin' In with Chris and myself, H, and this is the latest from Lars Danielson's Liberetto. Yeah, great sound. I've been enjoying that one. I haven't heard all the tracks yet, but that one's particularly good. A track called Allen, Allen, from the fifth album from Liberetto, the group which is led by Lars Danielsson, the cellist and bass player as well, called Echo Meyer. And if you're wondering what that means, well, it's a word he's made up. He said it's a newly invented word, by him presumably. The echo part describes the expansive field where sound resonates, and Meyer, M-Y-R, I take it it's Meyer rather than Mir, is an Old Norse word for more, so echo more. These are sounds from the depths, from deep within oneself. And to quote some of the notes on the actual album and presser itself, says combines freedom, harmony and rhythmic intensity of jazz, well, definitely there, with the vision of cultivated sound that comes from its classical roots. And I think that sort of sums up in many ways the whole thing of Liberetto. This sort of, again, it's not quite a third stream, but definitely that mixing of a classical sort of sensibilities with jazz, a sort of a chamber jazz sort of feel to it. We saw them live at the London Jazz Festival a few years ago, and very good they were too. And like I said, definitely worth checking out live if you get a chance. And this new album on the ACT label, thanks as ever to ACT for sending that over, will be coming out on the 17th of April. And if you like that small group chamber sort of sound, particularly with a slight classical sort of feel to it at the back end, check that one out.
Definitely. And as you say, live, they were fantastic. They really were a band made entirely of virtuoso.
I should say, we actually should say the band, shouldn't we? I forgot that. Yeah, of course, you've got Lars Danielsson leading, Gregory Apriva, who I think is sort of, flies under the radar a bit, doesn't he, Gregory? Never quite sort of has the profile of some of the others. Magnus Öström from EST on drums, and our own John Paracelli from Loose Tubes and Such Like guitar.
And if you get all 5 albums, you'll find the pianist has changed over the course of the band. But very, very interesting nonetheless. Next up from me, a terrific release from a saxophonist, flautist, teacher and composer, Alex Tarantino. Her 5th solo release, and I must admit it's the first one that I have, although I shall now be checking out the others. Perhaps she's best known as a member of Jazz at the Lincoln Centre with Wynton Marsalis, who describes her as a one-woman wrecking crew, in a positive way. From her new release, The Roar and the Whisper, here's Inside Looking Out. Fabulous. Alexa Tarantino and her quartet with Inside Looking Out. The fabulous new album is called The Roar and the Whisper, which has been sitting at the top of the US jazz charts since its release 5 weeks ago, which is a very good outing indeed. Quartet is made up of Stephen Fife on piano, and a good pianist as you heard, Philip Norris on bass, Mark Whitfield Jr. on drums, and there's a couple of guests. Cecile McLaren-Salvant sings on 2 tracks, and there's also a guest percussionist. Alexa and the band show the full breadth of her playing, and they're all great original compositions. Hopefully The Roar and the Whisper will bring her to a bigger audience, as I said, and perhaps we could catch her live sometime.
Indeed, great sound, and a real swinger, as they say. Next from me, going back quite a while actually now, and again just remembering the great pianist Richie Beirach, who sadly we've had a bit of a clutch of deaths of late. Hopefully no more for a while, but that's life for you, I suppose, isn't it? Your moment in the sun and all that. But Richie, a wonderful player, not quite up there with Jack Gittinetts and the Ralph Tanners, but was always there, either in the background as a sideman, and several albums under his own name. And we featured one when we were doing a little of tribute to him, and then another one which I'd heard of, I've never actually been able to hear, was one called Eon, which I think was either first or second he did on ECM, with Frank Chusa on bass, Jeff Williams on the drums. It only seems to be available in Japan these days. Anyway, courtesy of a very nice Japanese gentleman online, I managed to get hold of a CD, which is the way I like it. And let's have a listen to this earlier track. I'm really quite enjoying this album of late. It's been in and out of the CD player quite a bit. This track is called Places. Well, I bet you don't need me to tell you that was Oscar Peterson. Unmistakable, isn't it? Those runs and that sort of Tatum-esque inspired and Garner-esque inspired sort of a style he had. Wonderful. From the album Unmistakable, which I actually heard on Radio 3 quite recently. Zemph re-performance. So it's one of those ones where they'd gone back to original recording or original gigs which hadn't actually been released. And then they'd sort of turned them back, a live performance, and made it into a recording. So used a recording process where every nuance was recorded, including the pedals and everything else, and then played back via sort of computer on another piano, as it were. So it's not actually directly Oscar, but it is him, if you see what I mean, via the wonders of technology. The man I love. And before that, as I say, Eon, the album, Richie Beirach, much missed, and Jeff Williams on drums, Frank Chusa on bass from that album that released back in the 1970s.
He always looked so incredibly relaxed, didn't he? Although he'd be sweating profusely. But there we are. Well, that is just about it for this week's show. But before we go, time for a track from avant jazz rock guitarist and banjo player Brandon Seabrook, with Elias Stemmisdare on keys, Henry Fraser on bass, and Erica Dicker on violin. Here's the title track from his recently released and slightly unusual, I must say, Hellbent Daydream. See you in a couple of weeks.
Be good and see you then.
Bye for now.